if they're the right person for this and you have extra seats in the organization, that's great. Just find another seat for them. But if you don't have a seat for them, as tough as it is, you're going to have to make that tough decision, because it's, if you're a for-profit organization, you can't keep a bunch of people around just because you like them, they fit your culture.
You're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools.
You start with something small.
You'll never get your entire organization if you don't pull off operations. Don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have our last today.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we discuss the art and science of delegation, business management, and leadership. Today, I am stoked to talk to Kevin Taylor. We just had a really good conversation even before we started recording, just kind of understanding a little bit of where Kevin comes from. But Kevin, I look forward to sharing your expertise and knowledge in business and leadership here on the podcast. So if you can, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about what you've got going on in your life right now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Kevin Taylor, and so the majority of my life, I was a career banker. So I was a career banker for over 25 years. It's funny looking back at things and connecting the dots, looking backwards, because now I can see where I spent the majority of my life has really set me up very well for what I do today. And we were talking before we started recording on how I realized I just love the game of business. I love working with business owners. Love hearing how things work, and I love hearing. Sometimes there's companies I've worked with, and I'm like, I had no idea there's a business even around this industry. And so it's just so much fun. I love just being curious and asking questions. And I'd heard a quote a while back: "Is never regret your past or the path you're on, because you never know the journey is preparing you for." And so, I'd like to share a little bit of my journey, because, a lot of it is filled with just steep learning curves, some failures, getting fired from something that I helped start. And when that's your identity and you have a change like that, it hits the ego. Mm-hmm. And it takes a little bit to kind of get over that and reset. And so I'll start back kind of in the beginning where we were having a conversation before this, is, how I got into banking is, this was when I was actually going to community college. I started going to community college, and there was a girl in my speech class that worked at a bank as a part-time teller. They called it peak hours there. And I needed a job at the time, and she's like, "Hey, look, we pay $12 an hour." And for me, I was like, man, that's a lot of money back then. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, where do I apply? And so applied, got a job as a teller. And for me, that was so much fun as a job, because it was basically, I was getting paid to talk to people. So it was social hour for me, and I got paid for it. And I was meeting business owners. It was a lot of fun. So it was a teller for a while. I can't remember how long that was. It was probably for about a year. And then looked at, hey, what's the next step from being a teller? How do I move up in banking? And so it was, to me, the natural progression was, let's move to the new accounts. And my motivation, and it looks like, and also my motivation in life, even to today, is, I see people doing amazing things and doing stuff. I'm like, man, if they can do it, why not me, right? And so I saw the person that was doing the new accounts. I'm like, hey, if they can do it, I'm sure I can do it. So applied for that position, did the new accounts, again, looked for the next step, which was an assistant manager, managing the tellers, controlling that area. I'd been a teller before, so I got it. And so moved into that position, and then moved up to a branch manager. And it was a very fast progression. I want to say it was 3 or 4 promotions within like a 2-year time frame. And for me, all I ever wanted when I was going to community college was, man, if I could just make $40,000 a year, that would be, all my problems would be solved. And I know 40,000 isn't a whole lot now, and it was a little bit more back then. It still wasn't a lot, but that was my goal. And when I made it to a branch manager, I was making more than that. And but the funny thing is my first job as a branch manager, since I was promoted so quickly, I was getting the max as far as the percentage allowed for promotions, but since it was so fast, so quick, when I became a branch manager and in charge of the employees of that branch, their salaries, their promotions and stuff, I saw my assistant managers getting paid more than me. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And so thank goodness they quickly corrected that. And I just had fun. It was fun doing that. There's a lot of sales that was involved on the retail side of the bank. And I just enjoyed motivating people. So much so that it got to a point where of those branches in the bank that I worked at, it was either the top 3 branches for the year got to go on an annual trip. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that someone would pay for my wife and I to go to Mexico for a week and celebrate and do that stuff. And I didn't think it could get much better than that. I remember I was a branch manager and I was working at a location that had some oversight on the commercial side. The lady that was the market president was someone who'd been in the market for a long time. She had a lot of relationships, but she wasn't real strong on credit. And so our kind of the market president, the one that was kind of over all the community presidents, spent a lot of time over there, and he and I got to know each other, and he was the one that actually asked me, he's like, hey, have you ever thought about coming over to the commercial side of the bank? And I didn't know what that was. I said, no, I'm having a great time here. And I think he asked me how much money I was making. It wasn't over $100,000. It was probably something that was close to $80,000 or $90,000 a year, which was plenty. I mean, that was double my goal, right? Of 40.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, let me show you what it would look like if you came over to the commercial side. And I was blown away. I was like, man, I didn't think I could make this much money. And so I agreed. I said, I told my district manager on the retail side, I said, hey, I'm going to try this commercial banking thing. And she did not want to lose me. She said, hey, if you go and something else opens up, a bigger branch opens up, you're going to have to start back over the beginning. And I'm in my 20s and said, hey, look, I'll take that chance. And so I learned a lot over the course of the next year. I mean, I was going to school. I was joking earlier that, I went to college for 10 years and I'm not a doctor. I took several pauses in between there. But finally got my degree, but I had not gone through credit training. And so as I was going through credit training, they created a position for me. And it was basically, this position was a business development person. And so I was taught how to do business development on how upper middle market does business development, which is calling, making the appointment, seeing if there's a need. If you get through, past the gatekeeper, making the appointment, and just dialing for dollars, basically, is what it was. And that was not fun for me. I tried it for about 3 months, thought I made a huge mistake. And when I finally just sat back and took a step back and said, we're calling on these smaller companies. And so we define, like, the companies that I was calling on were typically the ones between 2 to 50 million in revenue. So we called, lower middle market or small business banking. And so all these guys, the owners of the businesses were wearing several different hats, and they didn't have time to pick up a phone call. And that's why I wasn't getting any appointments. And so I just started dropping in cold. And so this was something I'm like, I'm going to try it. And what I find is that I believe that most people they have a good heart. They're nice. You show up in person. You're respectful, you're dressed decent. They're not going to tell you to, hey, get out of here, kid. Yeah. They're going to talk to you. And so I had developed a script that was basically, I'd walk in, ask for them. I knew they were going to ask if I had an appointment or, who I was with. And I had an answer for that. I mean, my answer to them was, I'm one of your neighbors down the street, and it's my job to meet the business owners down here in the area. And I haven't had a chance to meet Mr. Jones or whoever it was. And so they're like, oh, okay. And so I would get so many introductions that way. And then when they would come out and talk to me, I was just surprised how much of an open book they were. And out of the thousands of calls that I did, I maybe had 4 or 5 people that were just like, hey, kid, like, you see that no soliciting sign? That means you too. Or like, very, very rarely did that happen.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, this is really good. And so there was success there, and so much so that we actually rewrote our business development plan. And so a lot of the seasoned bankers that were at that bank we're told, hey, this is our new business development plan. This is what we're going to do. And we got a lot of pushback, especially from people who had been there a long time, that were seasoned. They're like, I'm not doing that. And so there were tough conversations that had to be had, not by me, but by the market president, that was, hey, look, this is our business development program. You're either on board or you're not.
Yeah.
It's your choice. And so, over the course of 2 years or so, we did really well for the markets that were doing this. And we came up with this harebrained idea to start our own bank. And this was 2007 timeframe. And I remember the day because I thought it was an April Fool's joke. It was April 1st of 2007, where, to the guys, they brought us in a conference room and they said, hey, we are resigning from this bank today. It's our last day. We're starting our own bank and would love for you guys to come with us. And we just all looked around the room like, you're kidding, right? And they're like, no, we are resigning today. And so it took about a year for the process. And when you start from scratch, it's a de novo bank. So we didn't buy a bank or anything. This was start from zero. And so it took about a year to do the capital raise. We ended up raising about $26 million in capital. Officially open. And so I left my bank end of 2007, November 2007, joined the tail end of the capital raise and invested my own money in it as well. This was actually a good story too, because it was, 2008 was not a good year for banks, and the bottom had not fallen out yet, but we saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah. And
when we officially opened May 5th of 08, in April of 08 is when they're like, hey guys, if you want to invest, like do it now, like before we open. So I cashed out all my stock in the bank. It was a publicly traded bank. And so cashed out all my stock, put it into this new de novo, brand new bank, and prayed for the best. Again, late 20s. I think I may have turned 30 by then. So I was like, hey, look, if I mess this up, there's time for us to fix it and, time for me to restart and do anything else. And so that was total luck, because by August or September of 08, when I cashed out at $60 a share from the bank I was at, it was down at $20 a share. Woo! So Dodge, man, it was 100% luck. No foresight on my part there. But it was fun. I love building things, and it was a lot of fun building a bank from zero, $26 million capital raise. Our original plan was a 5 to 7 year deal, build it, sell it, do it all over again. And so I'm 30 at the time. So, hey, do this twice. I'll be in mid 40s to late 40s, and I'll go off and do my own thing. So it was about 5 years into that journey of starting our bank, knocking on a bunch of doors. And by the way, in 08, it not being a good year for banks, it was a great year for us, because we had a clean balance sheet, none of the problems from the past. A lot of the clients we got early on were coming to us because their bank just stopped doing whatever it was, real estate loans, lines of credit, whatever it was. They came to us. And so it really was a good time for us to start. And so fast forward about 5 years into that journey, I ended up meeting someone who has become a long-time friend, but it was in a networking group. And in that networking group, he at the time, he was running a group called the Alternative Board, which is a group that it's kind of like it sounds. It's a board of directors for companies that aren't big enough to have their own board of directors. And so that's what I knew him as. And then he started this new thing. And he gave me a book called Traction, which it's a lot of the books that are behind me now are the Traction books.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've got that very EOS orange filled thing back there. Yes.
Yeah. And so he's like, hey, I'm doing this thing called EOS. And I'm like, what is that? He said, it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. Oh, so it's a software? He goes, no, it's not a software. He said, it's a way of managing human energy inside your business. I'm like, oh, tell me more. And so he's like, well, it's all outlined in this book, Traction. He gave me a copy of it. And, I'll admit it sat on my bookshelf for a little while before I read it. That's what happens to a lot of the books I get. It sits on there for a little bit. But then I finally cracked it open, read through it, went through the first chapter. And I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of what we need here. And, finished the book, gave a copy to our CEO who he had read it, loved it. So we had started we started self-implementing EOS inside the bank. We got a lot of things wrong now looking back at it, but it was we started with having these level 10 meetings, which is weekly meetings with the leadership team. Developing a scorecard. What are the things, the 5 to 15 items that if we're doing really well, gives us a pulse on how we're doing in the business. Setting quarterly rocks, the top priorities of the company for that quarter. And we were able to grow the bank. And so I exited, and I'll get to the story in a minute, but when I left, we were about $1.2 billion in assets. So grew the bank from $26 million capital raise, $1.2 billion in assets, still privately held on there. But during the course of that time, like I said, I love the game of business. I was introduced to an organization called EO, not to get confused with EOS. So Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. Ended up meeting someone that was, I think he was the market president at the time. And he had said, hey, you should really think about becoming a sponsor of this organization. They call them SAPs, so Strategic Alliance Partners. And I was like, well, what do I get if I become a sponsor? Why would I sponsor EO? And I'd heard of EO. We had a few clients that were part of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And, he told me, what it was about, entrepreneurs, it was our target market, over $1 million in revenue, decision makers in the company, people that wanted to work, on their business, just really appreciated a group that they could talk to, get slowly at the top as an entrepreneur. And he said, well, part of your sponsorship is you get to come to these monthly learning events. And you're sitting at a table with 8 to 10 entrepreneurs. There's usually 70, 80 people there, but you're sitting at a table with a small group, and you get to know them. And over the course of time, I think those will probably be really good clients of the bank. And so it's like, all right, that all sounds great. Well, how much is it? And I can't remember at the time what it was. I think I think Comerica was the bank that was the sponsor, and they were going to renew, but they said, hey, this, it's probably not a good fit for our local EO chapter. And they said, I want to say it was either $10,000 or $15,000 for the sponsorship. And I'm like, man, that's a lot of money for us, as a small community bank to write a check. And I said, I think Comerica, it's a rounding error. For us, we got a budget for this stuff. Yeah. And so talked to both our CEO and our chief lending officer at the time, and they were on board. They said, okay, look, we will do this. But if we do this, you have to go to every single learning event, track who you talk to, the potential outcome of it, and we'll decide if we want to renew next year. And so, man, I went to every single event, made sure I was talking to at least 3 or 4 people every single event, following up, doing the contacts. And that forced me really, one, to go to all the events, to talk to people. And what I learned over the course of time is that I had a lot more in common with these entrepreneurs than I did with my banking colleagues. And I had a lot more fun hanging out with them than I did with my banking colleagues. And there was a phrase I was told a lot that I used to take offense to. And they would say, hey, you don't seem like a banker. And I was like, man, I've been doing this forever long at the time. I've been doing this 10 years, 15 years at the time. And I was like, what do you mean I don't seem like a banker? And they're like, yeah, you just don't seem like a banker. And then what I finally realized they were telling me was, you're more like us. Like, they had this picture, like people think in pictures, right? And so they had a picture of what a banker was. And I didn't fit that image. I was more relatable, or they felt like I was more like them. And so over the course of time, 10 years or so, I was like, man, I really enjoy hanging out with the entrepreneurs. And again, we were self-implementing EOS. The guy that had given me the book remained a friend of mine. I wanted to send him clients. And so I would order traction books I would order 50 at a time from him. He would give them to me at his wholesale price. It was like $12 a book. And so I would hand those out with my card in it, to people that they're my clients or prospects. And I was like, you want to learn more, call this guy. And I didn't realize that I'd been promoting EOS for, basically a decade on this, and sending referrals to other implementers. And so fast forward to, 2022, 2023, remember 5 to 7 year, this was a 5 to 7 year plan. And so we were 14, 15 years into a 5 to 7 year plan. And, when you start a business and you do with the plan to exit, you get paid on the exit, and whether you take it public or you sell.
Yeah.
And so I started to push some buttons, and I started digging more into the EOS, into traction, and into what and also rocket fuel, what a visionary integrator should look like. Accountability chart. It's like, I don't think we really have an accountability chart. We kind of have an org chart. And I was like, oh, the book says we need 5 to 15 scorecard items. We've got 32 or whatever it was. Oh, yeah, 3 to 5 core values. We have 10. This doesn't make sense. And so I started pushing the envelope on that. And then and luckily, I think it was in 2019. I know our family went on a spring break trip to Colorado, and I remember we got snowed in one day. Our kids were out playing in the snow, and I brought a book to reread. I'd read this book before, but I didn't really get it. And so I was like, everyone's talking about this book. I was listening to Bigger Pockets a lot. And so it was the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so when we got snowed in, I was like, I'm going to reread this. And so when I read it a second time, it really made sense. And up until that point, my wife and I, we had 2 rental properties by mistake. When we first got married, we lived in a 1-bedroom, 743 square foot condo that we still own today. And that was all we can afford. I remember we bought it for $30,000. And then we lived there for a year before we bought a house, bought a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And we didn't know what to do with the condo. We tried to sell it. It was hard to sell a condo. So I just leased it to friends. When we moved from our 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to a little bit bigger house, it was during the financial crisis of 2008. Like, everyone was giving me low ball offers. Couldn't sell it. Didn't really need to sell it because we didn't owe a whole lot on it. And so I just asked myself the question, and I'm started listening. Actually, this is before I started listening to Bigger Pockets. I was looking at it and said, look, if I could buy this house for what I owe on it and lease it out, I'd probably do that. So why don't I just lease it? And so right next to the for sale by owner sign that I had out there, because we weren't in a hurry to move. We were renovating a house that we had purchased in Dallas. Went up to Home Depot, bought a for rent sign, put it right next to the for sale sign. And this is how unprepared I was. On my way home, it was a suburb of Dallas. I'm driving home, about 25-minute drive. It was about 5 minutes into my drive, driving over the bridge of a lake, and I got a phone call. I answered it. And they're like, yeah, I'm calling about your house that's for rent. And I said, oh, okay. What can I do? And they're like, how much is it? I had no idea. I hadn't thought that far through. I said, let me call you back. So I hung up the phone, drove it back around in my neighborhood, looked for another house for rent, called them. And I asked, how big is your house? It was about the same size as ours and everything too. Mm-hmm. And how much are you paying for rent? I think at the time it was like $1,200. I said, okay. So I just hung up. So I called the guy back and said, it's $1,200 a month. That's how I set my price. And so that became our second rental. That was my market research right there. And that became our second rental. So those were our 2 rentals for a while until I reread, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And when reading that, I'm like, we've had these rental properties, at that time, it was for a little while, gosh, I don't know, at least 10 years. And so I was like, you know what? I should probably start buying more rental properties. And so I just, April, I went back, bought another rental property. How we bought those is I did a home equity line of credit. We had a lot of equity built up in the house that we're in. And so did a home equity line of credit, learned the whole, Bigger Pockets, BRRRR concept where you're paying cash for the house, you're renovating, refinance, rent, repeat, all that stuff. And so that's how we bought it. I got a tenant in there, refinanced it, got my cash back. And then, again, April 2019, then I bought another one, I think in September of 19. And that was a little bit better purchase. And then things just weren't fitting in the funnel. So when 2020 hit, I'm looking at real estate transactions every single day. Yeah. When 2020 hits, a lot of these things start working in my funnel. And this little thing that I created about, debt service coverage ratio, if I put a cap rate on it, is it, what's the value on it? Is it, what's my cash on cash return? All those things started turning green. And I'm like, whoa. These all work. And so I think it was 2020. We bought 10 properties in 2020, and then we bought some more in 21. And so that, fast forward, I tell that story because those properties gave me, now those have all doubled in value, gave me the courage, the confidence to say, hey, if things aren't going right in the business and the bank that we're doing, I can call it out, and one or two things is going to happen. They're either going to respect me for this or they're going to fire me for it. One or two things is going to happen. And so I started calling things out as I saw them, and in a respectful way. And I'm like, well, hey, why are we doing it this way? Or we ever looked at how many items we have on our scorecard? Or why do we have 10 core values on this? And so I remember having a conversation with our CEO, and I said, hey, why don't we hire, the guy's name was Jeff, the guy that had given me the book. I said, why don't we hire Jeff as our EOS implementer? Because there's a lot of things I think we could probably use some help on. And the response I got back was, well, I think we're doing a pretty good job on this. And I was like, huh, he goes, you don't think so? I go, no, I don't. And I think we could do a better job at it. And yeah, I think I'm trying to get how we got to this question, but the question was asked like, well, what do you think we could do better? Or something like, what do you think we can do better? Or what is it we're not doing? And I remember, I was like, I don't know if I should say this or not. And I was like, do you really want to know? And he's like, yeah. I guess, well, I think we're not hiring an implementer on this because you want to hold everyone accountable, but you don't want to be held accountable. And it was like, I'm like, man, I think I wrote my way out of the bank at that conversation. And like I said, it was, hey, they're going to respect me or fire me for this. I thought it went well though, over the course of, 2023, I wanted to live in my zone of genius. Well, I love the business development part of it. And so my plan was to start dividing up my portfolio that I had in the bank, focus on what I do best, which was the business development side of it, building relationships, looking for good clients of the bank, and kind of being that backdrop to to the bankers who I'd refer the business over to. And it took about 6 months to do that. And I remember on a Thursday, I had a very good friend of mine. He was my direct report. And he came into my office, shut the door. It's a Thursday, and shut the door. And he's like, "Hey," he's like, "The time has come." And we'd had some conversations before. I mean, I was warned, like, "Hey, you're pushing some buttons here." And when he said, "The time has come," and I said, "For me, for you, or for both of us?" And he's like, "They want you out." I was like, "Oh," I was like, "All right." I kind of knew this day was coming. And the good thing was, 2 weeks prior to that, I actually had a conversation with another banker friend of mine that's at a different bank. And I was expressing some of my concerns. And I love that he was just open and honest with me. And he said, "Kevin, let me tell you something. If you wanted to come work for me at the bank, I don't think I'd hire you." And I was taken back by that. I was like, "What do you mean?" I said, I'd be your best banker ever. And he said, "Yeah, you would, but you'd be miserable in 6 months. Because this is not what you're built to do on this." And out of the blue, he just said, "Why don't you just become an EOS implementer?" And I was like, "Why did I not think about that?" He goes, "Dude, you know the process. Y'all basically been self-implementing for 10 years there. You know a lot of the stuff. I mean, you're willing to die on the sword because of the stuff that you're not doing right. So why don't you do that?" And so that's what led me to this path. And now that I'm, about 2 years into it, oh man, it's so much fun. Like I love, taking businesses through learning the foundational tools of EOS. We do that, 3 days that are about over 60 days. It's 3 full days over that 60-day period. And then running the quarterly meetings, going through there, helping companies, set good rocks and do stuff. It's just so much fun. But, I know this is the Delegate That podcast. And so, what do I learn? And a lot of this stuff is, man, I just had to hire my first assistant. And I hired her a couple of months ago because there's a lot of stuff that I got to start delegating. And we actually have a tool in EOS that's the Delegate and Elevate. And, it's four quadrants. It's, on the bottom quadrants are the things, excuse me, that you don't like and you're not good at. Then there's the things that you're good at, but you you don't like. That's most people's living hell. It's, they're really good at it. They just don't like to do it. And the goal is to delegate those things and move up to the top quadrants, which are, the things that you're good at and you like, the things that you love and you're great at. And so I'm in the process of doing a lot of that. And I'm telling you, it's hard to, let go of email and let go of some of the things that are on there. And, we teach it in EOS. A lot of times you got to tell people 7 times for them to hear it for the first time, hear it and internalize it for the first time. And I'm learning that firsthand at a lot of this stuff. So,
do you feel overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time? It's time to reclaim your schedule and focus on what truly matters. Get your time back with elite remote talent without the time zone hassle. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus on more $1,000 an hour tasks. Schedule your free strategy call at wisevas.io.
It's a bit of a process for sure, especially, implementing EOS inside of your company. It's a difficult thing to be able to do, which I always recommend folks get an implementer for sure. It's one of those things that's, you saw it in the bank. When you're implementing it yourself, you get to decide what the rules are. When you have an implementer come in, they get to call you on your nonsense, right? And then just kind of let you know, no, these are the actual rules, and you're just busting them up. But I want to go back to, like, you'd said a few things there that I want to kind of go back to. You were in the middle of building a bank, right? Which is not something you had done before, but you're creating all of this. How did you guys kind of figure out who was responsible for what throughout that process? You had a couple of people say, hey, we're resigning. Do you want to join? How did you guys figure out who was responsible for what throughout that process? Because you hadn't implemented EOS yet. This was just a new thing. So, deciding, hey, we're going to delegate these tasks to these people. You're going to be doing those things. How did you guys decide that?
It's like a lot of businesses do. They're like, oh, this is what you've done in the past, so this is what you're going to do now, type deal. And it was, and I'll tell you, there was some friction early on. One of the things I did not get into is when we started the bank, the 2 guys that told us that, hey, we're resigning and we're starting our own bank, only one of those made it through, after we opened, because it was like having 2 chefs in the kitchen. You can't, it doesn't work. And I don't know. I don't think EOS had been created this time, or we weren't aware of it. So having that visionary integrator role on that, I think we had 2 visionaries really that were just butting heads and like, this is where we're going to take the bank. No, this is where we're going to take the bank, and this is what we need to be doing. And finally, it got to the point where one of them had to go, and I'm still friends to this day with the one that had to leave. He's actually one of my very good friends, and so that there was some friction early on. And then when we brought in, our chief lending officer, someone who had done that in the past, our CEO had 3 roles. He was, the chairman of the board, president, and CEO. So, and again, those are all titles. Those aren't, and if I were to say I think he is a visionary. I think he probably ran the visionary role, but typical things, the good things that come with the visionary, so are the bad things, because visionaries cannot stay. If you get that visionary stuck in the integrator role, which he was kind of doing both for a while, chaos will ensues, because visionaries cannot stay focused enough to get things done. And so the integrator is the one that really keeps that train on the tracks. They drive the culture throughout the organization. They make sure, they're driving the accountability through there. And that's really what was needed. And we didn't find that till later on.
So, obviously right person, right seat is one of the things that folks have to figure out with EOS. Now, when it comes to hiring, bringing new people in and having those conversations, as an implementer, how are you managing those egos in those rooms to be able to say, hey, like, you're not the right person in this seat, because if I recall correctly, you're not technically supposed to tell somebody they're not the right person for that seat. That's supposed to be an internal thing. But at the same point, those egos get in the way. And that's something that sometimes has to be brought up. How do you manage it? And how do you recommend folks manage that as they're kind of leading their business?
Yeah, that can be fun sometimes. Yeah. So I'll tell you, I'm not a consultant. I'm a coach, facilitator, and teacher. And so the answer's in the room. We just got to facilitate to that answer. And so one of the first things that we do, it's actually one of the first days when we're building out the accountability chart on a full day session, I tell them, look, no one works here. All right. Pretend that no one has a job. You are the board of directors. Okay. we are looking 6 to 12 months out. We need to build the right structure for your business, what it looks like 6 to 12 months from now. And so what are we going to have? We're going to have a marketing and sales function. We're going to have an ops function. We're going to have a finance function. What are the right functions? And so we work together as a leadership team to create those functions. And then we have the integrator and the visionary. We develop the roles. Like, okay, what are the roles for each of these functions? Because every company is different. So what are the roles? Once we do that, I said, okay, do we all agree that this is the right structure for the company? And they say, yes. I said, okay. All right, now let's start filling the seats. Who wants to go first? And usually it's the person who sits in the finance seat, raises their hand because no one else wants that seat. And so so the finance person's like, I think I want the finance seat. I said, all right. Say his name's Bob. So, all right, Bob, finance seat, you ready for a real-time performance review? And then they're like, I don't know. So here's what we're going to do is, Bob, we're going to start to your left. And I explained the get it, want it capacity to do it. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, Bob, we're going to ask our leadership team here, do you get it? Do you want it, the seat? And do you have the capacity to do it? And so we go to his left, and whoever it is, you go around. I need 3 yeses from each of you on there. When we get those yeses, we're like, all right, congratulations, Bob. You own the finance seat. What's next? And then there are some times that come, I mean, that's where it gets interesting. But sometimes 2 people want a seat. Yeah. When that's the case, we go around and we do the get it, want it capacity to do it. And then there are times when we go around the room and someone's sitting there that doesn't have a seat. And then it's like, all right, got to call it out. We just went through, we filled the seats for the leadership team, and we have a person that does not have a seat. What are we going to do? And I tell people, like, look, if they're the right person for this and you have extra seats in the organization, that's great. Just find another seat for them. But if you don't have a seat for them, as tough as it is, you're going to have to make that tough decision, because it's, if you're a for-profit organization, you can't keep a bunch of people around just because you like them and they fit your culture. And so, it's a tough decision that has to be made. But, a lot of times when that does happen, sometimes it's up to them if they continue to come to leadership meetings. If they typically don't have a seat, because I work with the leadership teams of the company, they eventually kind of fade out and they just quit coming to the meetings. But yeah, it's a process that happens over time.
And it's one of those, and I think self-reflection for folks is extremely important. I know I was in a position for a little longer than I probably should have been at one point as an integrator. Not your day-to-day operations guy. I shouldn't have been in the integrator seat for as long as I sat in it. And it was one of those things that sitting back and looking at it, like you said before at the beginning, like looking back at the dots, it was like, oh, wow, I could totally see the dots where they stopped connecting. At one point, it just stopped connecting. And I wasn't honest with myself, and we weren't honest, I don't think, as a leadership team. And it was like, okay, now we definitely need to make a change. It's time for us to make this happen. So it's uncomfortable having those conversations, but they're conversations that have to be had. Because again, if you're a for-profit organization, it's for the betterment of the organization to make these decisions and make the calls. So, but it's, anybody listening, for sure, like, be open and honest with each other. Have the self-assessment. What's actually happening inside this company? Because again, if it's the wrong person sitting in a seat, then the company's not going to be doing what it needs to be doing. So you said that you just recently hired your first assistant. So what did that look like? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do on this. And so really, I'd actually talked to another implementer who has this rock star assistant. And it's funny, if you've ever watched the show Suits, he described her as the Donna. He's like, she's my Donna. Nice. Like, she's awesome. She's like the best assistant ever. And so his Donna, we'll call her, and started, she started training other assistants of, this is what I do, these are my processes. And the assistant I have, she'd actually worked with an implementer before. She'd worked with an expert EOS implementer. And so what that means is the person the implementer she's worked for had over 500 sessions under their belt. And so she understands the process and what EOS is and the things. Like, she understands that, hey, I'm having a vision building day this day. These are the things I need. And so she gets it. It's just, I wish people, I wish she could read my mind and know everything that I want to be done and do things right the first time. It doesn't happen. It's not her fault. It's things that I just need to make sure, communicating clearly and practice what I preach, right? Knowing that, hey, I know I'm going to have, if I've told her 4 times, so I've got 3 more times to tell her before she should get it. And and just working through that process. But that's how I found her. I found her through just a referral, working with asking another implementer.
Referrals are oftentimes the best way to get solid folks. So you can't complain about that. What have you felt has been? What do you feel is going to be the hardest part of bringing an assistant in as you continue to grow and build things out? Like, some people really just don't understand how to. I shouldn't say understand. They have a hard time kind of realizing what they should be letting go, what they shouldn't be letting go. What do you think is going to be your hardest struggle letting things go, or in the bringing in of your assistant? Yeah,
making sure that I communicate clearly what my expectations are on things. I mean, for example, on like email. Now I'm a visionary, so I always I love sitting at 30,000. I love sitting at 50,000 feet. But so like the 30,000 foot view of that is, I want you to take over my email on stuff too. I could say that, but now I got to explain, okay, what does that mean on here? Yeah. And so the process of, organizing the email on things that may need Kevin's attention, things that I can reply to, things that are immediate. And so it's letting go of that. I've never had anyone help reply from my email that other than me until now. Yeah. And so she usually doesn't reply as me. I mean, she has access to my email. She has her own email that she's replying to, but it's just, it's what we teach. It's like, I got to let go of the vine on here and trust that I know it's not going to be done with 100% accuracy. I've got to be okay with 80%. We're not at 80% yet, but I got to be okay with getting it 80% of the way there on this, because if I don't, I'm not able to grow. I mean, and I told her the big picture, all I want to do, like down the line, my goal is all I want to do is talk to businesses, see if they're a fit, and run sessions. Like that's all that's what I'd love to do. And so after a session, I should be able to get to a point where I take a picture of the notes, send it to her. And she's told me to do this. I'm still doing it, but take a picture, send it to her. She enters the notes in. She's got and she's putting all the stuff into the CRM and all that stuff. That's what we need to get to.
Yeah, and that's a tough process. That's a tough thing to make sure that you're able to kind of make all that happen. And that was so when I hired my first assistant, that was my hardest part, was knowing what to let go and how to let it go. I would either fully let it go and look away and then realize that it wasn't getting done at all, or I was like, I didn't know how to even coach or train or teach how to be able to do all this stuff. So I ended up, like, my first two assistants had to let go for one reason or another, but it was on me, not anybody else. So it was one of those that it's hard to work through. But I'm sure that if this person comes highly recommended, you're going to figure out you and her are going to figure out a really good way to work together. So looking forward to hearing the success story afterwards.
Yeah. And I just got to tell myself, look, I ask myself the question, am I communicating clearly on what needs to be done? Am I doing everything that I need to be doing to make her successful? And I need to be doing that.
Yeah. And being honest with yourself when you say it too. Right. So that's oftentimes the hardest part, because we can easily lie to ourselves. It's hard. It's harder to lie to other people, believe it or not, than it is to lie to ourselves. We'll do it to ourselves all the time. One thing you mentioned quite a while back, I want to jump on real quick before we wrap up, is you had said something very early on, that when your identity is wrapped in this thing, right? When you were talking about the idea of potentially being let go from the bank. It was one of those that I wanted to jump back on, because oftentimes, especially as entrepreneurs, our identity is wrapped up in our business. Like this is our baby. This is what we do. This is who we are. How did you kind of separate? How did you kind of let yourself? I'll preface this with a small story. My wife's getting ready to retire from the military. She's been in for 20 years. She's finally getting ready to retire. Cannot wait. She had a general recently talk to her a couple of years ago before she decided to retire. Like, grabbed onto her uniform and said, "You got to know when it's time to take this off, because this isn't who you are. You are what's underneath this uniform, not what this uniform is." And too many people in the military have a hard time letting that go, the identity issue, which is one of the reasons we have such a suicide problem with veterans. But entrepreneurs, that is like, that's our uniform. We put that on and we're like, hey, this is who we are. We're this business operator. We're this visionary. We're this banker. We're this creator of things. So how did you kind of separate yourself from that identity? How did you make that transition feel more comfortable? Or maybe it wasn't, I don't know. How did you make it feel more comfortable to say, that is not my identity. That's not who I am. I don't need to wrap myself up in this and be just who Kevin Taylor is.
Tequila and no, I'm just kidding. I don't really do that much.
Now you do sound like one of the veterans. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. No, it was really hard. It was, I will tell you, it took me being open and honest, reaching out to the GoBundance community and telling my story and saying, hey, look, this is new. And I think it was probably like 2 hours old when I'd reached out and I made a post and was like, this is what happened. And it was, I think, being vulnerable and reaching out to community and then getting responses back like, hey, this is happened to me. This is what I did. And hearing those stories too, but it's super hard because, you're at a networking event or something, like people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a banker. So it becomes that identity, right? Yep. Oh, I'm a commercial banker. Yep. Oh, I'm this. And now I'm an EOS implementer. And so it's hard when you identify it for something for so long to not say that anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's really not who we are, and realizing that's not who we are. That's just what we did as a profession.
Yeah.
And so now, I think of, really what, who am I? And I'm still working with this too. And it's like figuring out, hey, what is my unique ability? What's my zone of genius? And, I really feel like I'm a connector of people and connector of businesses and things too. And I just happen to be able to do that through, used to be banking. Now it's through EOS implementation. And it's something that I enjoy to do, but it takes a while. I think it was refreshing to hear other people's stories on that. It's normal for it to take 6 months to 8 months or whatever, however long it is, to start to let go of that identity and start to do that. Just knowing that that's normal. And before I forget, as a side note, like we can continue this conversation offline, but I had a very similar conversation to your wife's story yesterday by a veteran who was in the Navy for a while, and he's working with private equity companies that they feel like veterans are very positioned into a way to help take over companies that are from baby boomers and stuff that don't really have an exit plan, an exit strategy,
for sure.
But bringing veterans in to help run these companies and save businesses that would have otherwise just kind of gone to the wayside because they don't have an exit plan on that. So that can be another conversation.
And I think that it's one of those things that I think you're saying 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year. A lot of people take a lot longer than that. And I think I'm going to credit you to say, hey, like you said something up front and said, hey, how do I deal with this? And it's one of those that the quicker you're able to just ask the questions and be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know how to make this transition smooth. Help me out. The quicker you're going to get some good responses from solid folks who are there to help you, as long as you're asking in the right place. It's the same thing I tell folks: don't go ask for marriage advice from the divorced guy at the bar while you're drunk and you're in the middle of potentially getting a divorce. That's the wrong place to ask, right? But if you're in the right room with the right people, ask the questions, be vulnerable, make it happen. But Kevin, it was awesome to have you on here. I thank you so very much for jumping on the podcast. If folks are listening to you and say, hey, man, I'd really love to have him come in and be an implementer, or maybe just try to bend your ear for a little bit, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out. I mean, you can shoot me an email. It's the kevin.taylor@eosworldwide.com, or website eosworldwide.com /Kevin Kevin_Taylor is the website. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help any way I can. Got a core value of help. Core value of help first, and we live and breathe our core values, and so I'm happy to help any way I can.
Awesome. I love it. For those of you listening, please like, subscribe, comment. Tell us below what your favorite part of the podcast was. Let us know what struck you the most, what you loved, what you didn't like. We look forward to interacting with you in the comments. I thank you all very much for listening. I thank you again, Kevin, for jumping on, and we look forward to seeing everybody on the next show.
Thanks. My pleasure.